This is the Free Spirits of L&D podcast, where we talk about life as a freelancer in the fascinating world of learning and development, and ask our guests all the questions you wanted to know but were maybe too afraid to ask. Yes, we even talk about how we get business and what we all charge. At the end of each episode, each guest gets to set a bonus question for the next one. So whether you're thinking about taking the leap, brand new to freelancing, or an experienced freelancer, you won't want to miss this. It's the third episode of our new season of the Free Spirits of L&D podcast, and our special guest today is Kelly Rodrigues. Kelly is a learning designer and a people leader who is currently heading up the L&D team for Web Pros in a contract role, and also, like many other freelancers, wears a number of other hats in other roles, including the Resuscitation Council. Welcome, Kelly.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me today, and hello to everyone listening back.
Yeah, and I think people who listen to our last episode will remember you from our Free Spirits live episode. You joined us as a little guest on there where we were talking about the live conference event that happened.
Yeah, so thanks for having me back. Yeah, great conference.
And we're going to start with a question about your journey as a freelancer. Do you want to tell us where that all started?
Yeah, well, my journey in L&D, I guess, before I was a freelancer, I actually started as a trained dancer. So my background is in dance, in professional dancing, contemporary dancing, Latin and ballroom. As you are children, you know, you get into these different sports and activities, and mine was that, and found myself on the professional stage after and during graduating with university with a dance science major. And as part of my degree, actually, I realised I didn't want to be a performer. Spoiler alert, you know, most people want to go to dance to perform, and that's not something that I found myself wanting to do. Actually, at the age of 16, I remember it like it was yesterday, so this is a great tip for any L&D designers, is that I remember this session, this lesson at college where we was learning actually about the different routes that you could take, I guess, in the environment of dance, and I found myself exploring dance therapy. So how can we use dance to support people with neurodegenerative disorders such as dementia, Parkinson's, and it really captivated my imagination. Like, how do we use dance for good to help people in their life? So obviously, whilst I pursued that route around dance into university, was performing, I also volunteered with one of our leading dance psychotherapists in the UK called Richard Curtin, who works for the NHS, and really lucky to be working alongside him. And so we visited dementia care units and care homes and Parkinson's sort of respite centres and you name it, using dance for good. And I found myself then very lucky straight out of university. So this is probably a good reflection, I guess, about the education system, I guess, as a whole, is that because I had that applied experience over the 3 years with my degree, I was able to land a job almost straight away from university. So I'd come out of university 3 months, landed a job actually as a physical activity and sport development officer. And I found myself, like, I don't know if anybody remembers the Specsavers advert where you have the woman on the stage with the boombox and she's going around all these bingo halls doing the chair-based exercise and whatever. That was basically me around the whole kind of borough of Kirklees. So it's a big place. And I quickly realised I cannot do this on my own as the only person doing this stuff. So I quickly trained up how to be a learning designer at that point, and created a whole heap of workshops, basically teaching people, showing people how to do what I was doing. So that's everything from chair-based exercise right the way through to setting up tea dances in the community, teaching people how to ballroom dance so that they could run tea dances in the local care homes, and all of these because there is a lot of science around how movement patterns and music stays with us, even when we've got dementia. And I never forget a quote where we was at a tea dance and the husband came over and thanked me because it was the 1 hour a month that he got his wife back. The rest of it, she wasn't there because of the dementia. And so it really has that profound kind of impact. And then after being there for 9 years, I moved on to a national charity, UK Coaching. Shout out to UK Coaching, doing some incredible work in the field of sport and physical activity coaching. Worked my way through as a learning designer there, doing some freelance work with small organisations there, helping them out around, you know, just simple things around training resources, how they might restructure workshops, having a little bit of a dabble in that space. And then worked my way up there to sort of heading up their learning and assessment team before moving on to Web Pros. And so really I've only had two main jobs since leaving university because I've been super fortunate. One was 9 years, one was 8.5 years, and now moved on to sort of web pros to head up their global L&D team at that global web hosting company there. But yeah, so that's the link between dancing and where I am now.
Gosh, and do you still get to introduce any of the dance elements into your work now?
Unfortunately, not as much as I'd like. I do dance outside of work still. I do dance socially. I'm very, very lucky that my husband also dances as well. It's part of his culture, and so we do get lots of opportunity for social dancing. But linking the two together, not quite so much. The best I've got for you at the minute is that I lead a wellbeing group at Web Pros, and it might be that I can do some salsa sessions online with them as an example, or some wake and shakes, that kind of thing. That's the best I can probably do at the minute in terms of connecting them both together. But yeah, no, it's definitely something that is a very fond memory that I hold. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it, how people often do themselves down for having fewer jobs since leaving university. I definitely can resonate with that. But actually, in a lot of ways, you'll have a similar, if not a more enhanced amount of experience than people who had 10 jobs, because you'll have had the chance to sort of deepen those skills and deepen that knowledge and bring all of that into your practice and in your future roles. Yeah, I've had a few people say that to me recently, but I only had a couple of jobs since leaving university, and actually it's a really good thing. I think it shows how loyal you are for a start, but also that having depth as well as breadth can be a really underrated thing.
Yeah, I agree. And also, I am naturally the type of person is that, I am loyal and committed to a cause, whatever that cause may be. But also, if an organisation really aligns with my values, that's home for me, and that's important for me, is when I'm joining an organisation as a freelancer, as much as, someone that's contracted, that those values really align, and that I'm not doing myself a disservice, because ultimately I would do the organisation a disservice as well, I guess. So yeah, so I'm very privileged that I found two, and hopefully the third organisation to be home for a while as well.
That's a really interesting point you make there about values, particularly as a freelancer, because I think there's often this conception of freelancers that they'll pretty much go wherever and they will do the job that's needed for the contract that's required. How do you get into that conversation with people about company values and what they look like, and what they're actually really like as opposed to what they're written up on their website, and how they fit with yours? Sorry, that's about 5 questions there.
So how do I get into, let's take the first part. That's how do I get into that conversation? So I guess I get into that super early. It's really important for me in that consulting phase, in that scoping phase, when I'm vetting the company, really more than the work, shall we say, is just really understanding what's important to that company, what are the values, and how are they live, how do people live and breathe those as part of the organisation culture as well. It is okay that there are a lot of commercial companies out there that will prioritise profit over perhaps other areas, and although for me that is sometimes a challenge, because for me I'm all hopefully about doing impact. I think most learning designers are here to champion the learner, get the right results for the learner, and quality, I guess, over anything else. And that's something that obviously that is very close to me, but it's about trying to influence some of those kind of perceptions on the values as well. So, respecting their values, respecting that they need profit, working within the boundaries, the constraints that those values may create, but also making sure that the work you're doing, I think, as part of that organisation, is aligning with your values. So if you're doing a piece of work that's perhaps conflicting with your values, isn't perhaps the work that you morally want to do, we're going to feel it, and we're not going to be comfortable with the work we're doing, and it's going to perhaps not be our best work or perhaps the best experience. And it's something that I am quite a firm holder of the boundary on, actually. I've not needed to turn down too many sort of pieces of work because of that, but there has been a couple where I've said I'm not the right person for you, and that's okay. That's okay to do that.
I really admire that. I really admire that as a quality of being able to hold those boundaries. I remember vividly, and this happened about 15 years ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. We were interviewing for a role in the company I was working for at the time, and we were interviewing for a programmer. and it was quite a specific set of skills. So we didn't have many people apply, and we had even fewer people who got shortlisted. And one of our favourite candidates turned up to the final interview with a kind of envelope, almost like a sort of game show, and sort of passed this envelope across the table to us and said, before we go any further, I just need to let you know that if there's a chance I might be working with or for any of these organisations, I need to take myself out of the running. We kind of went, all right, cool. So we opened the envelope, and sure enough, there were a couple of organisations there that were on the list, and there wasn't anything kind of, it wasn't like a arms dealers or anything, but there were some companies on there that maybe might have had some slightly questionable practices. Yeah, so they took themselves out of the running for this particular role.
Yeah, I mean, I love Mondays. It's no secret, and controversial, I know. Sorry, I don't know. I don't want to offend anybody that hates a Monday, but I love Mondays. And so I could never imagine anything worse than Sunday night, seeing the clock ticking and dreading Monday. And I've, thank God, in my whole career, very, very few times have I probably ever experienced that. And I really, truly believe that's because I enjoy the work I do. And the reason I enjoy the work that I do is because it's aligned with my purpose, my why, my values, all those kinds of things that we speak about. And I truly believe it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a bit more of a kind of philosophical question. I'd be interested to know your take on it. How did you arrive at knowing what your values are when it comes to work?
I think for me, well, first of all, values are evolving and they can change. I don't think we should believe that they're just static, that these are my values, and because we evolve as humans, we learn with and from each other. For me, I guess my values when I left university look very different to what they are now. And I think, there's a strong sense of affiliation when something feels right, when something feels, when something doesn't feel right versus when something feels right. And ultimately, that's your moral compass telling you, I think, this is aligning or this isn't aligning. And ultimately, that's what I'm usually guided by, as opposed to just having my values written and being beholden to my values. I do have, an idea of what my values are, what I like to do in the world, where my purpose, where I'd like my purpose to be, where I'd like my impact to be around, helping people to thrive and really changing lives of people, whatever that might be. But actually, my moral compass is the thing, that gut, that instinct that says, I'm not quite sure this is right, or go for it, this is great. I think for me, that's how you probably know if you're aligning, but actually defining your values, it's useful to have them in mind, I think, but I think also accept that they will evolve over time. So they're not static, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a lovely way of looking at it. I used to work with somebody who used to talk about values like one of those sort of gravity sort of mechanisms where if you're applying so much pressure, it won't move. And then if you apply just enough, it will kind of push down and start to slam down. And they used to talk about their values like that, in the sense that you almost don't really know what your values are until they get pushed, until they get challenged. And especially if somebody says something or somebody behaves in a certain way, or, you find yourself in a position where you the way you've just described, you're not, your gut's saying, no, I don't like this. And it's like your body just has that sort of gravity hits you and you go, no, I'm not going to put myself in that position again. But you kind of have to put yourself in there first to know that that's a place you don't want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And then on an organisational level, when you're talking about values on an organisational level, going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, is that sometimes underpinning those, there might be sort of leaders that are responsible for echoing the company values as well. So again, if the values of the company are not aligning with yours personally as a learning designer or a freelancer, and you've got the leaders and you're constantly pushing against the narrative of these values, as an example, you do have to question, am I adding value here? Is this actually worth it for me, and sacrificing that? And I had a really, really interesting conversation yesterday, actually. So we're sort of building out some competency frameworks for our leaders across WebPros, and there's a section in there that you would automatically think people operate within. So transparency, being ethical, inclusive, leadership, all those kinds of things. And it's a shame you have to list them to be explicit. You almost think they should be implicitly there, but they're not. I think that if we hold quite shall we say, strong values around societal good, and then we're paired with someone that perhaps doesn't hold those values quite so close to their self, then you can feel that friction sometimes. And it's the same with an organisation that you might work with. Do you really want to be there to cause friction? Positive disruption is one thing, but friction is a completely different thing.
Yeah. One of the things I did want to talk to you about is a bit of a pattern I've noticed lately with people from the L&D industry that I'm talking to, that the industry seems to be going through a bit of a rough time at the moment. I think a lot of industries are, but particularly the L&D industry, I'm seeing a lot of people, looking for roles, really struggling to find roles, companies who are really cutting back a lot of their L&D function. And whether that's an AI thing, I'm not sure, or it could be lots of other things happening together. I suspect that's probably the answer. How do you go about thinking through making your work future-proof and your sort of services and value future-proof?
Yeah, a great question, Mark. So what comes to mind? Well, I've actually got 3 areas I think that we perhaps should explore in this question. So one of them is aligning yourself with the company as a strategic partner. So L&D, to be quite honest, is seen as a cost centre. And the reason it's seen as a cost centre, because unless we generate, say, income from external sources, i.e. bespoke work. So my old organisation, UK Coaching, we did that as well. So we balanced out our costs versus our income. Whereas where we are now, we are a cost centre. We cost, we don't bring in. So the way that you can bring value into the company, and that's what we need to do here, is by aligning what we're doing operationally with the business goals. And that's usually where L&D falls down a little bit, is the fact that we are so beholden to order taking and fighting the fires across the organisation. One manager wants this, one manager, and it's all very micro. It's not really macro, as in looking at what is the organisation trying to achieve this year, next year, 3 years and 5 years, and how do we align L&D functions, people, products to that. And then second of all, as part of being a strategic partner, is how do we then measure the impact of what we're doing? So it's not about how many's completed. It's not about who's hit the LMS, how many in-flight learners we've got of any particular whatever we've created. It's actually about what learning transfer has happened, and therefore what is the impact on the business. So if we take a sales analogy, currently a live example, working with the sales enablement team, we want to increase knowledge around products. We want to increase confidence to be able to sell those products, and therefore we should hopefully then see lead generation increasing and potentially sales increasing. So my job is to try and track what is it the efforts of the L&D team has contributed to the increase in sales across these products that we're now creating product enablement solutions for, as an example. And that is how you prove the value of the L&D, to be able to, instead of them cutting L&D, because they are seen as a cost centre unless we can prove the value. The other thing that I would suggest is that we start to look at the consultancy approach within L&D. So one of for many years, L&D organisations, teams, people, freelancers have managed to get away with putting on a lovely environment workshop, flipping out a piece of e-learning, and it's done the job. With the emergence of AI, this is what you touched on earlier, is we've now got a technology-enabled world, and that's where I stand on this. Is it's technology enabling the stuff that we can do as L&D professionals, but we still need to be human-centric. And what does that mean? So where we're consulting with teams, we need to really understand what is the problem that they are trying to solve, and therefore what are the skills, knowledge, and behaviours that need to change or evolve to address that problem. Is it even any of that? Is it actually a process? And I think it's really brave for L&D people to be honest, if it is not L&D that's a solution. The worst thing we can do is parachute a workshop in there or an e-learning module in there if we know it's not really going to work. So being really, really clear on What's the problem we're trying to solve? Who are the target audience? Getting to know their real world, their workflow. So how long do they have to even invest in a resource, let alone an e-learning course? Yet if they can only spare a few minutes, or the actual issue is when they've got a problem, they need to be able to look on AI, find the answer, get the answer and deploy it. There is absolutely no point creating a one-off piece of e-learning that they then have to scroll through 20 minutes to find the answer. I was recently listening to Nick Shackleton-Jones on a podcast, and there was two examples that really stood out for me. One of them was in a call centre way back in the days where they used to patch people into a conference call. They did not need a 20-minute module to find out how to patch that person in. They needed within a couple of clicks to find out how they patch that person in. Now, traditionally, people might have thought that's not an L&D function. Like, we just do workshops, we just do e-learning, we do that formal stuff. But that is, I'm suggesting that is the role of L&D moving forward, is to really understand the problems we're trying to solve and solve it. Another example he gave was surgeons. There were a group of surgeons that had been on a 2-week workshop. One group, the other group had been given a checklist, and they want to reduce the mortality rate. The one with the checklist is what reduced the mortality rate, not the 2-week workshop. So it pulls into question what is the role of L&D, and it's about us solving problems. Now, some of those problems won't be solved by us, but a lot of them will be if we just change our perspective, and it might make some of the trainers a little bit uncomfortable, maybe the e-learning developers a little bit uncomfortable, but it's just about thinking differently about our position in the world, and that's where we can add value, because that's where we can have impact on human performance. And that's what we need to get to, is how do we prove human performance with a technology enabled world, not technology takeover, but enabling human performance through technology enablement is where my head's at the moment with that.
So Tom McDowell in our previous season talked about this quite extensively, and he was quite open and quite controversial actually in saying, if you are in e-learning and that is your main job, you probably should be quite worried about what's coming, because, you know, using your language, like just knocking out a piece of e-learning to solve what seems to be the service level problem just doesn't going to cut it anymore, because most customers will go to AI and they can solve that problem very quickly probably in a better and a deeper way, with multi-languages and, you know, AI avatars, and even the ability to interact with it in a way that would take us weeks, months to design if we were working in isolation. I think that human-centric approach, getting deeper, being more consultative, is absolutely the way to go. Actually, before we started recording, you were talking about detective work and being a bit of Miss Marple this week. Is that what you meant, like, in that sort of consultative piece? Yeah.
So I've spent most of my time in the last month investigating than I have producing. And what I mean by that is just really, so not taking the first problem you're presented with at face value and really trying to understand. So this is a real example. So project came in, we need project management training for this particular department. So my first question back to them, okay, well, talk to me about the problem. What is it? Communication. They just can't tell us when things are not going well. Okay, well, that's slightly different to project management. I agree, project management awareness might be useful but are they actually project managing? No. Right, so the plot thickens. Okay, so they're not communicating, they don't project manage, but you're assuming they need project management training. Let me go on some investigations here. So I went around and spoke to various departments that connected within this team. And the problem was they have a process in place that they're not following. They have all the tools in place that they're not using. That is not really an L&D problem to solve, although I can surface those findings to the person and say, look, this is what I found. What does this mean for your team? How can we help? Is there anything more that we can do? And then it turned the script into, no, actually, this is something I need to take away and look at implementing as a team. So I guess as L&D professionals as well, even just doing that piece of work as a freelancer and then saying, it's not me. You can still bill them for your time for helping investigate and surface the problem. But I think you add more value, authenticity and transparency by then saying, it's not a me thing, this is a process thing, this is a systems thing, this is a whatever thing, this is not L&D. I'm here to help if you need anything, but I'm limited to what else I can do to help. And I think there's something really powerful about that, in getting to grip with the problem and really grappling with the problem.
Yeah. And it can also be really uncomfortable, I think, for the customer or the client at the time. I've got a real example of this from this week, right? So I got a brief through from an L&D manager for a team that they support. And the brief seemed really quite tight. They gave me how long they wanted to spend on it, how many people were involved, what the outcomes they were looking for were. And so I was like, okay, great. Do you want to have a call about this? Because my usual response back to that sort of thing is, brilliant. I've got some questions for you, and I'll ask a load of questions, and we have a bit more of that back, and ideally we jump on a call and we talk it through. So we did all of that, and I sent my proposal through. We tend to be quite open about pricing on here, and lots of our guests have been open, so I'm happy to share. I think I was charging something in the region of sort of £6,000-7,000 for this piece of work, for like a workshop that needed lots of design around it, lots of bespoke materials, and a bit of follow up with the leader. And I got an email back the other day saying, thanks for a proposal. I've just had a conversation with the leader and they were hoping you could maybe do it for £500. And it's like, I called them straight away. I said, okay, it seems like you and I have had a conversation about this that's very aligned, but whatever the team leader wants is completely misaligned with the conversation that we've had. Is it possible to just get them on the call? And there was a bit of reticence there. I don't know if there was a bit of gatekeeping going on. Oh, it's my job to be the L&D manager and I'm the interface between the external providers and the people who need the support, or whether it was something else. But I just detected a bit of nervousness about doing that. So I think it is really important as well, as part of that consulting approach, to make sure you're talking to the right people.
Yeah.
Where possible. Because it can be really hard when you got that misalignment going on. Because I have no idea how I'm going to get them from £500 to like £7,000. I suspect we're not. I'm going to end up walking away from it. But it's a classic example of what you were talking about, I think.
Yeah. And there was a recent example about misalignment where we've been working with a manager around sales enablement, actually, the sort of previous example that I gave you. And so they've got this vision that they want an e-learning course because you go from A, B to C within a set time. You get out, you're given a quiz or a knowledge check, so you can tick that green box off as well, and you can put a stamp on that. Whereas we know sales is not just about the knowledge, it's also about the art of selling. It's about the art of the relationship. It's about the art of inquiring about the customer needs, etc. So I'd asked to meet with the people that will be selling and pull together a small focus group to understand their reality. And I could not tell you how different they were in terms of what they need as the end solution. So the manager knows what knowledge and skills they need, which is fine. And they confirmed that was some of the things that they needed. But actually all they needed was sort of problem-based solutions. So when I have a problem, i.e. pricing's changed, there's some new features that's been released, or I just need to refamiliarize myself with this customer persona, they want to be able to put in the prompts into AI to be able to surface the material. We already have that function. So we use Confluence and it has a function called Rovo. And so long as the data and the information in Confluence is accurate, it will surface the materials. So what we're going to build out is a toolkit in Confluence full of either a demonstration video, a tip guide, some persona work, some marketing battle cards. None of it is going to touch e-learning, and that's what we're going to do. And so I guess it's like the misalignment. Our job is also to investigate how do we bridge that gap? Like, what is the actual truth here before we just dive in and get on with the work? Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, it is. Yeah, finding the truth, finding the right person who knows the truth is it seems like such an easy thing to do, but it can be incredibly nuanced work.
Yeah.
And AI don't do that.
No. It takes courage, I think, as a freelancer, if you are not part of the company, to kind of start to check and challenge what is true, what's perhaps not so true, and how do you get to the truth. And I think it's just about leading with impact. In order to have the best impact for your company, to gain the best return on the investment you're about to make in me and this project, for me to truly achieve your business objectives, I need to try and understand this problem thoroughly to understand exactly what's needed to make it effective. And I think that's perhaps your way in, because every business wants that business impact.
So you said there were 3 things. So we've talked about being a strategic partner, taking a more consulting approach.
Yeah, and the last one is around data and impact, getting friendly with data. So I remember when I first started out in L&D, well, like 18 years ago now, and we had a research team that sat somewhere over here, and we had an L&D team that sat somewhere over here, and the two just never really met. Unless we wanted a survey creating or we want to do a learning needs analysis, then they might help us to create and surface that. And then we would, have a little look at the data, or they would produce the report and we would read the report afterwards. However, as we've evolved, the two roles have become much closer, and I think most L&D professionals are also feeling that now, as marketing with L&D. So how do we also market our products? But for this point, I will stay on data. So in order to sort of be future ready, we need to be able to interpret data and data tell. So data, storytelling, data telling. So be able to create those stories and the narratives from the data about the impact. And in terms of what data we should really be trying to collect, and it does require a bit of after work, is that transfer of learning and that impact into the business. And that won't be immediate because we need time for whatever solution we've just created to settle in, for people to use it, for them to use it in their workflow, for them to realise the impact, and then for the business to feel that. So it goes beyond the number crunching. So that was one thing that for me to stay future ready is I need to be able to do that. And anyone that knows me knows that I am not a fan of spreadsheets, don't get along with numbers very well. I can tell a story for sure, but I have to get comfortable with that, and I have to know what I'm trying to do in order to prove the impact of the services that I'm providing or the solution. Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you get comfortable with something that's just not you're not a natural affinity for?
Do it. I mean, for me, I'm very privileged. I'm very privileged. In the company that I'm working with, that we're currently working on a central data dashboard. So currently, the organisation doesn't collect a lot of transfer of data learning. They're not unique in this. A lot of organisations stop at number crunching and initial feedback, satisfaction type things. Not a lot of organisation goes beyond that. Some do, but not a lot. So creating a centralised dashboard that can collate the qualitative and quantitative data and surface it in a way that's user friendly, I think is a good thing if you can do that. If you can influence that, and you can have a centralized dashboard that's got some pretty bar charts, that's got some percentages, that at a snapshot can tell you that story. That is a gift, and that's what I'm working on getting. The other side of that is for us to stay current, joining webinars, seeking out those skills. So who do we know that's a data analyst and who can help us understand the data? How can we get those skills from kind of our networks, but also the L&D network or beyond our networks as well? So being really proactive in that. I didn't pass maths in my in high school, so I'm not a numbers person. However, more recently I've completed an apprenticeship in leadership, and I needed my maths to complete that. In fact, it was a week before the government squashed it. So go figure. Yeah, and it was a week before the government said actually adult learners don't need maths anymore. I'd completed my maths. I got my GCSE, well, functional skills, my functional maths. So I didn't get along, but what I had to do was get uncomfortable to be comfortable again. And that's sort of the philosophy of learning, right? So the magic happens just on the edge of our comfort zone, and if we are comfortable, sorry, we're just not really growing. So yes, I think you have to get uncomfortable to be comfortable, or be comfortable with uncomfortable.
Yeah, I've never heard it put like that before, but I can totally agree. For me, it's the same. It's maths, it's accounting. I think I chatted about this with Joe actually, that I've got this really perverse love for it now, that I still know I don't like it. I wouldn't want to spend all my day doing it, but like every couple of weeks, I'll get myself a nice coffee and some biscuits, and I'll sit down and I'll bring everything into alignment. And the beautiful thing about numbers is that everything has rules and everything kind of behaves, unlike a lot of messy stuff that we get involved with. But every 2 weeks, I have this sort of intensely productive like afternoon where I go through and update all my accounts, and it feels completely zen at the end of it. But I know I would never want to do it full time. It's weird. So yeah, I got uncomfortable to feel comfortable, and it's a very strange quirk of human behaviour that I think.
Yeah, and
Now,
getting it and feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable is our
yes,
superpower that we can do as well. So that continual learning is uncomfortable. but you, in my opinion, to be future ready, you need to get uncomfortable with feeling well, you need to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable with growing. Yeah.
You've just given me a beautiful segue here. We're talking about superpowers.
Yeah.
Because in our last episode, we were chatting with Jo Cook, and we got into this whole thing about Superman, and she posed a question for our next guest, not knowing that it would be you. And she was interested to know, how do you manage the dichotomy of freelance work? It's a bit like Clark Kent and Superman. How do you wear multiple hats, such as being an expert in L&D, but also maybe not in running a business and being a whole person and a family person? How do you manage all of that aspect of freelance work?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. Thank you for that question. I think I'm really strong on boundaries, really strong on boundaries. It's the thing that keeps me sane. It's the thing that gives me my self-respect, really, if I'm honest. So, I'm not a mum, but a fur mum. So I have fur babies in the house. But I am a wife. I run a house. I've got a full-time job, as you know, with an organisation, and then I do freelancing on the side. And so juggling all of those, it is a challenge. For me, it's about ring fencing time. So from this time till this time, I'm logged on with work. When I've logged off, this is what I'm going to do. I protect my time in the morning for the gym. So it's a non-negotiable. What are your non-negotiables for you? Gym is a non-negotiable. My lunchtime walk is a non-negotiable. My weekend walk and my weekend gym is a non-negotiable. Those things won't move, they're staples, and those are what fuel me. And then ring fencing, blocking the time for the people or the resources that need me as well. So when am I going to be doing my accounts? Do I have an admin morning once a week? Do I have an admin day once a week? Do I have it once a month, as an example? And not allowing admin to take over everything, because it can really easily take over when you're a freelancer, when you're constantly thinking about accounts and emails and keeping on top of everything. And you do need to keep everything ticking over for sure, but actually ring fencing specific time for that. And then are you going to allow yourself to be creating solutions at midnight? Are you going to be encroaching on your family time on your weekend? And no, like, I think for me, and I think it's about us taking on as much as we can, maintain those boundaries. The minute that we take on too much, the scale starts to tip one way or the other, perhaps, and things start to slip. And usually the first thing that starts to slip is actually yourself. So I won't go to the gym in the morning because I'll just get on with that piece of work, and this weekend I'll probably not go on that walk because I could just do with those couple of hours back to do this. And the minute you start to do that, then it starts to impact your well-being, and you stop performing perhaps as well as you once could, because you've stopped investing and pouring fuel back into the tank. So I think for me, boundaries are about a self-respect as well, but they're also about us maintaining healthy boundaries to manage the expectations of others around us. How I manage it.
Beautiful answer. Thank you for that, Kelly. Yeah, we this came up on a previous episode, but there was this mantra of who gets the best version of you every day or every week, and it's a really useful reminder that chimes with what you just said around kind of protecting your time, protecting those boundaries, and making sure that whoever you decide gets the best version of you genuinely does, rather than just a little dreg end at the end of your day where you've given everything to a client or to your partner or whatever that looks like. It's a really useful thing to reflect on at the start of a week or the start of a day. Who's going to get the best version of me today?
And having somebody that can also help you to check those boundaries, because it's really easy for us to become blind to those boundaries. My partner, he's incredible at helping me maintain those boundaries. He can see when work's getting a bit busy, when I'm taking on something else, and he'll often say, "You've not been to the gym this week. Is everything okay?" Or, "Hey, we've not even been out to connect or anything for ourselves for a month, like we need to do," and so he's really, really good at helping me maintain those healthy boundaries if I'm becoming a bit blindsided by work and things are just morphing into one, because that's easy, it can happen easily. So having somebody as an ally that can just now and then help spot patterns and trends to help just check in if you're okay and if you're maintaining the boundaries that are right for you.
How about for you then? Would you like to set a question for our next guest?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's something that we touched on earlier, actually, about knowing our why. So I'm really keen to hear from the next guest is our worlds are chaotic. Usually, like you've just said, we're juggling multiple hats, roles, etc. So how does your next guest, or how do we, the listeners, stay centered into our why? Is something that I'd love to hear from the next guest.
I think you kind of did touch on this earlier on, but
Yeah.
do you want to have a blast at that for yourself?
Yeah, so I guess earlier we'd mentioned about values. We've been speaking about values and keeping that in mind. So I think, how do I do that? So I think it's about me reminding myself of what is the impact I want to leave in the world? What is my core purpose? What do I want to wake up feeling like? And if that's not happening, then something's perhaps going on that's not aligned to my why. And also journaling is a really useful tool to just remind myself as to the why, looking back over some of the sort of maybe some of the impact pieces that I've had, or the impact reports, or the anecdotal feedback, things like that also help me to stay aligned to my why, as to why we're doing what we do. Like I said, I've been tremendously lucky in my career to have sight of the actual impact that some of my work has had directly on people, and so that has really sort of strengthened and reinforced my why over the years. So once it starts to, if anything ever in the future, start to feel a little bit off-piste of my why, I'd like to think that I'd be quite sensitive to that happening, because I've been so grounded in my why for so long. But yeah, that's some of the things that I do to just remind myself why I do what I do, and stay aligned with my purpose.
I can hear those fur babies in the background.
Those are the fur babies in the background, yeah.
I will let you get back to them. But
Yeah,
I'm just,
thank you.
before we do, got two final questions. And it's a question we ask everybody on the podcast, which is, what do you charge as a freelancer?
Yes, as a freelancer, again, I am fortunate that it's not the only work that I do, so I'm not just dependent on that income. So my rough sort of day rate, shall we say, is usually between £650 to £800 a day, dependent on the work that I'm doing.
Thank you. And final question, if people want to get in touch with you, ask you about anything that we've talked about on this episode, how can people find out more about who you are, what you do, where you are?
Yeah, so feel free to reach out. LinkedIn, I would suggest, is the best place to catch me. So my link, I'm assuming, will be in the bio next to this podcast or somewhere surrounding it. Yeah, feel free. I've got an open door policy. I actually regularly meet with people who've reached out to me via DMs just to want to pick my brains about something. Likewise, I connect with other people, and yeah, I have an open door. So please do reach out, and we can arrange a cuppa and a chat anytime. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming back for the full episode rather than just a little guest spot, Kelly. It's been lovely talking to you.
Yeah, it's been a privilege. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you to everyone listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, let us know by leaving a review on your favourite podcast app. It really makes a difference. And if you want to learn more about how L&D Free Spirits can lift up your freelancing business, you can find out more information at ldfreespirits.com.